Welcome back to the second part and finale of Dr. Wenn Lawson's podcast. So sit back, take some notes, and continue to be inspired.
I'm an autism awareness angel, making sure my wings protect the different, the stranger than. I'm an autism awareness angel. It's good, cause I'm cool with the unique behavior. I'm an autism awareness angel. Will you accept me? Cause I accept you. I'm an autism awareness angel, cause a view from the spectrum is a better point of view. The question at hand, are you
Now, I know a myth that I've heard, which I particularly don't like because I truly believe that my son has it, but there's a myth that people with autism lack empathy. Can you please explain to our audience why this came about and what your thoughts are on the matter?
This came about because a long, long time ago, as autism was becoming known, and autism's been around forever,
Yes.
but it wasn't written about until the late 1930s, and then people commonly quote Kanner from 43 and Asperger, etc. They certainly weren't the first people to write about it, but they're the people we commonly know. And they talked about kids not connecting, and that was seen as empathy lacking. They weren't, if a child fell over, they might laugh instead of cry.
That's true.
You know, what we now understand is, if you don't have a connection to the fact that that caused pain, all you have is a connection to the act that looked funny, well, then you might laugh.
Yes.
So it's not about lacking empathy, it's about not picking up on the signs that build an understanding of empathy. So it's because I'm not noticing. Once those signs are connected for me, if anything, I can be too empathetic and it's overwhelming. I have young people who can't watch the news. It's too awful.
Yes.
They feel everybody's stuff too much. So
Yes.
it's not a lack of empathy. It's difficulties with connecting to the signs of what's happening for another person. There's also this thing that I think socially non-autistic people have learnt how to say and do the right things. They don't necessarily feel it.
That's true.
It's more oh dear, that must be hard for you. But they've got no idea and they don't care. Okay?
That's accurate.
You're in the supermarket, you see somebody you don't particularly want to see, but you realise they've noticed you, noticing them. So you say, oh, we must do lunch. I don't know what they're going to do to lunch, but apparently it means they should come together for lunch.
Yes.
Oh, that would be lovely, but they never do. It's just a social nicety.
Yes.
And it's supposed to convey, I have feeling for you. It's supposed to be empathetic, it's supposed to be social, good manners. But those are things people learn. As autistic people, we're very honest.
Very honest, yes.
I mean, we can learn to lie. I know that my older son, who's 35 now, going on 36, youngest son, oh dear, going on 36, the older one is closer to 43.
Time flies when you have children.
Certainly does, and that's a strange expression, with watches with wings.
That's true.
Oh dear, I'm losing what I was saying.
You were talking about your 36-year-old son.
Oh yeah. What was I saying before that?
You were talking about being in the supermarket and
that's
doing
right,
lunch.
Yeah. What was the example I was going to use for Tim? I can't remember. It might come back.
Shoot, I shouldn't have interrupted.
No, I get carried away, as in, without going anywhere. I go off on tangents. So.
No, but we were talking about social niceties and and about how children with autism are honest and
Oh, that's right. I was going to say, Tim has learnt how to fib, but it's taken him many, many, many years, and he still laughs when he does it. He doesn't get away with it, really, because he's not good at it. So we're not good at lying. We're very, very honest.
Yes.
And therefore, we might say something which appears to be lacking in empathy. You are fat.
Yes.
You should stop smoking.
Yes.
You're looking old. I mean, we do say these sorts of things.
Yes.
They're not meant to be out of malice or out of not caring for someone. I need to be taught that there's a time and a place, and certain things people won't like it if you avoid saying it, even though it's true. But I won't know that. It's not necessarily a lack of empathy. That's a lack of social connection, which is from a different perspective.
which is really interesting. And I know I have many experiences, as I'm sure many parents and people who know people with autism have. My son will just be very, as a matter of fact, and honest, and it's not because his heart is cold or lacks empathy. It's just in his head. That's just a matter of fact, and he's stating it.
I like the lass from the show called Bones. She's a really good example of some of that stuff.
Yeah.
She's a loving wife and mum, but in the show, as you follow through, with her, she'll come out with that. But say it as it is.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's exactly it. Like my son recently met an older gentleman, a lovely man, and he asked him how old he was. And of course, in my young son's mind, 72 is old, according to him. And he looked at him and goes, "Oh, you're 72. You're going to die soon." And I just thought, oh dear, this is not. And then lucky thing that he did understand people with autism, and he knew exactly how to take it. But for those people out there who might not understand autism, it's not because our children lack empathy. They're just explaining to you how they see things without any emotional connection attached.
Absolutely.
Which is wonderful. Now, you also speak in your paper about non-generalized object permanence. Can you please explain what that is?
Yeah. Object permanence is a term we use to imply that a young baby, often 8 months or younger, definitely before 18 months of age, has grasped that objects have a life of their own, even if you can't see them. So we play peekaboo, we hide behind our hands and then go, "Hi,"
Yes.
boo, this sort of thing. And the kid laughs of a certain age. When they're much younger, they actually think when you hide a ball behind your back or put something under the tablecloth,
Yes.
it's gone. It's not there. And they'll cry.
Yes.
Get upset. Eventually they learn it's just hiding. You're still there, and they laugh, and it's funny. They begin to realise that something can still exist even when you can't see it. Now this is really important because it applies not just to objects but to people.
Yes.
Actually, I believe it extends to emotions and way beyond objects. So I like to think of it as schema permanence. It's the permanent of the scheme of things, an understanding of how things fit together. When we were playing hide and seek with my grandkids, 2 autistic girls who are now 10 and 7. But when Holly, our youngest, was 5,
yes,
and we were playing hide go seek, when she couldn't see me, she believed I was gone forever, and she was absolutely sobbing with sheer terror, And we tried to explain, I'm not gone, I'm just hiding, and I'd show her. But the minute I was behind the cupboard, even though she watched me walk there, she would cry. She hadn't any sense that I still existed if she couldn't see me.
Okay.
And this is really, really important. It applies to so many areas of difficulty that people have not recognised belong to autism. I see grown-ups still wondering if something can exist when they can't see it. I went voluntarily as an exchange student to the UK.
Yes.
From Australia when I was doing part of the social work course. And I knew academically Australia still existed, my family was still there. I couldn't see them, couldn't feel them, couldn't touch, taste them, nothing. How did I know they were there? And I went through panic attacks of wondering if they were gone. It was awful. And a lady at the autism support group meeting I went to in Bradford in the UK said, do you have a photograph? And I said, I can get one. So my family sent me a picture, which I put in my wallet and I could look at.
Okay.
And be triggered to remember they're still there. I can't see them, but they're still there. With the girls, the grandchildren, we got walkie-talkies. Holly was waking up in the night, hours. She'd sleep an hour or seemingly wake an hour.
I know that drill.
Yeah.
Yes.
And she'd have to come in to mummy all the time. So we used walkie-talkies, So no need to come into mummy. I'm still here, but I'll talk to you on the walkie-talkie.
Okay.
So that was, and after a while, she would begin to sleep through because she could just see the walkie-talkie, and that was a reminder mummy's still there.
Okay.
So, and we did lots of things like this to practice building an understanding of object permanence, mummy permanence, and so on. Mum said to Holly, I'm just going to feed the chickens. And Holly was watching Frozen, one of her favourite cartoons. She watches a million times. And she said yes. Mum came back. Holly was crying, banging her fists on the floor. She stood up, she put her hands on her hips, and she said, "You are naughty. I'm going to tell the police. You're my mother. Mothers don't leave their children." You know, it's full on.
Oh, dear.
And
yes.
Katie said, that's my daughter, "I didn't leave you, darling. I was just in the garden. I went to feed the chickens. You know that I do that every day." She said, "You told me you were going to feed the chickens. You did not say you were going outside." Now, you have to go outside to feed the chickens. There's no other way to do it.
So there's a lot of assumptions.
A different concept.
Yes.
Katie had to say, "I'm going outside. I'm going to feed the chickens, and I'm coming back." See, that's then a complete picture.
Yes.
Typical children know when you say you're going, it usually means, "I'll be back."
Yes.
But in autism, we know the first bit, we may not know the second. That's now and next stuff. That's single-mindedness. That's all of those things. That's based in a lack of object permanence. So object permanence actually needs to be taught to those of us on the spectrum.
And you've mentioned really good ways in order to teach object permanence, like with the walkie-talkie, with the picture. Now, as a neurotypical parent, how do I make sure that my child understands object permanent or doesn't, to understand whether they do or not?
Yeah, it's a hard one, but usually behaviour and how they respond will tell you whether they have an understanding or not.
Okay.
So again, you got to get to know us. There are lots of kids who don't use language.
Yes.
So you relate through technology, through things like Prolo Go, through pictures, and so on, and work out ways of knowing what it is they're thinking. If somebody says to me, "How do you feel?" I remember my first response was with my fingers, "How do you feel?" I didn't honestly know what they meant.
Okay.
And even today, because I'm a synesthetic person, I live with synesthesia, which means, for me, it means that I have a crossover between feeling and colour. So instead of feeling good, I see yellow. So there will be lots of kids on the spectrum, pretty sure, who possibly don't connect in the same way to how they feel about something, or don't know where the feeling is. They might say they've got a headache when they've stumped their big toe,
yes,
etc.
Okay, and that's really interesting to note too. So just because they say they're feeling a certain thing, it doesn't mean it's actually that thing that they're feeling. To look deeper at what they actually mean by what they're saying.
You need to get to know them. You need to find a way that communication works for you.
Yes.
So that you can build pictures with them.
Can I ask you a question? Because there's something that's often confused me. They often say, and I don't know how accurate this is, that people with autism feel pain less than a typical person. But is that actually true? Or is it just, as you're saying, they lack, not lack, but they're different in their ability to connect to the feeling?
Quite often, I do have a higher pain tolerance.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if I'm really interested and focused on something and I've hurt myself, my attention is elsewhere. It's on what I'm interested in. I won't notice the hurt. As soon as I do notice the hurt, I feel it.
Okay.
So both of those things can be happening. A higher tolerance of pain and or a lack of connection because you haven't noticed. My son, remember him falling over? He cut himself terribly bad. Blood everywhere and needed stitches and so on. but he was playing ball, and he loved playing ball, and he didn't notice. So
Wow.
it took
Okay.
several minutes. Once he did notice, then the tears, then the I can't, I'm too sore, etc. But he didn't notice because he was occupied.
Wow, you know what? That's really interesting to note, and in a way, I envy that ability to not deal with it immediately as well. Now, in your opinion, what typical challenges do people with autism face, and why? In your opinion?
It's really hard because, again, we're all so different.
Absolutely, and I know I'm asking general questions, and I don't mean to.
No, that's fine. The challenges I face most often are that non-autistic people want me to fit some kind of social circle, and I'm a
Yes.
square peg, if you like. I don't fit there. I also have a lot of sensory issues, so as you're noticing, I wear Erling lenses, so I've got glasses with a pinkish tint.
Oh, I just thought they were really fashionable.
Oh, thank you. No, they're functional glasses. So I remember at school I had to wear shades, sunglasses, and was asked to take them off. Other kids weren't allowed to wear those in school. I needed them. So there's the expectation of fitting in and being like everybody else. And I'm an individual potato. I don't make good mash. I don't blend well with others. And that's a huge challenge. I also have a lot of challenges with... I have a PhD, but I find it difficult to cross a road. And I don't usually do my own shopping. I'm here in Vancouver. I will have been here like 7 days, and I've only been between the hotel and this building.
Okay.
And people say, you know, you should go out and see things. And I can't do that unless someone takes me, because I couldn't manage to navigate my way. So those are challenges. The expectation from others is a huge challenge. And it's sometimes easier to stay home and bury myself
Yes.
than to push myself to go out and do things which I would like to do, but I can't do them as a typical person might. So the challenge is just to not stay home and become a hermit,
Yes.
but to find ways around that and to do it anyway.
To push yourself.
Yeah,
And
with support, because I do need others to help me, and I have to ask.
Okay.
And it's very hard to explain. But in autism, we have that very, what's the word? It's skills that you can see at one point and they disappear at another. I can't think of the term. There is one for it.
I can't think of it either, but when you think of it, let us know. And I'm really happy that you mentioned that, because I know a common misconception from people that know absolutely nothing about autism is, as you said, if this person can't cross the street and has, my son currently lacks awareness of danger regarding crossing the street and things like that, but he can recite every star in the universe and galaxy out there and get into the minute details of the atoms and DNA. And I think people, the typical population, have a real hard time understanding that they can be so brilliant in some areas, but in the basic skills that takes the typical population no time to learn at all. I think grappling their head around those concepts are really difficult. And I'm really happy that you mentioned it here today, because you're phenomenally brilliant. And what you're saying is that even you, there are some things that you find difficult.
Absolutely. Fluctuating capacity.
Oh, I like that.
Is the term.
My new word for the day, which sounds brilliant. And so when people think about people with autism, to make life easier, I hope that people actually learn to accept differences and not just go by what people's common misconceptions of the general population. You can be brilliant at one thing and have challenges in another, just like the typical population have their gifts and challenges in other areas, that not
Absolutely.
everybody's brilliant at everything.
Yeah.
So
And probably as human beings we know that academically,
yes,
but to the degree that it impacts on autism is the thing that I think people find hard.
yes.
I've had people say to me, teachers at school, we know he knows that he did that yesterday. He did it yesterday in the green room with Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Today in the pink room with Miss Jones is another story.
Okay.
If you don't generalise your thinking very well, if you're single-minded, you might have a skill evident in certain situations that is not available to you at other times. I have times when words flow well. I have times when I become catatonic, I can't move and I don't speak.
Okay.
And trying to explain that, it's difficult. It's autism.
Because I was just going to ask you, how do you explain it? Because I know, like, for example, my son, sometimes when he's relaxed and whatnot, he likes to do algebra on his own, and he really delves in there. But the next day in class, he might not be able to do 36 plus 100. He might just decide, no, he doesn't want to do it. But
and it's not even a decision.
Or not, sorry, correct me, not that he didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
It's just that for some reason it's not available.
No.
And it's really hard to explain to people that this is what he was doing.
Yeah, it's like people won't even believe you.
No, that's true.
It's very different anyway. Being on his own, he doesn't have all that extra sensory overwhelming stuff from the classroom.
Yes.
He's more in touch with what he's thinking, and he's probably motivated because it's a topic of interest in the way that he's doing it. In class,
Yes.
it's done the way teacher decides.
Okay.
It's done in a book that teacher's chosen and everybody has. It's a very, very different scenario. As an autistic person, even if I've been given the same textbook each day, it's almost like it's new each time.
Okay.
And I have these rules, I did as a kid anyway, that I had to fill up all the paper before I could turn the page. And it might be that certain pages were for a particular subject and others were for the next subject, had to be on a different page or had to have a different heading.
Yes.
But the rule was, in my head, there's still space, I need to use it. And I would have learnt that somewhere. Someone would have said, no, you haven't finished, you can fill that bit too. And that therefore became a single-minded thinking that applied to everything.
Okay.
So there's all those barriers that I had to navigate and negotiate, especially in a classroom full of other kids that are all working at various levels.
Yes.
And have different needs. It's really hard.
And I'm really happy that you mentioned that, because I know one of the things myself as a teacher that I really want other teachers out there to learn is that just because a person with autism is in your class that might not be achieving what they could, let's say, on that exam of that day or on that paper of that day, that it might be the setting, it might be the environment, it might be the emotional state of that day.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that they don't know the content of the information that's in front of them. And I hope that teachers out there listening who are in front of their classroom really take that into note, because I think you've described it very eloquently.
Yep. I did all my university exams
Yes.
in my home. I tried to do a couple initially in a hall with like 100 other students,
Yes.
and the flicking of pencils and pens and movement of hair and clothing on students, coughing. I just didn't do a thing. So it looked like I would fail. But when I was given exams, and I did fail a couple, but when I was given exams at home with an invigilator,
Yes.
who just sat quietly. I remember one lady bought a book and I said, "You're not going to read that." Yeah? She said, "Yeah." I said, "No, you can't turn the page. It will just turn me off."
Yes.
She had to sit. It was a 3-hour exam that I did in 2 hours, but she had to sit for 2 hours and not do anything.
That must have. I've
was very hard
invigilated
work.
many exams.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
is hard work. Yes.
But that's how I was able to pass. I had all that. It wasn't that I didn't know. It was, as you've very well said, the environment.
And for the neurotypical population out there, I know many of you have sat in an exam of your own where people, as you said, do tap the pencil on their desk, will pull, will kick the chairs, will sway back and forth. And I know personally that I'm neurotypical, and that bothers me to no end. So if you're on the spectrum, I'm sure that's magnified.
It is.
So to be more empathetic with the community would be a great thing, so if you're sitting next to somebody as well in class.
Let's just make space for difference.
That's perfectly put. And why is it always important to look beyond the behavior?
It's important to look beyond the behavior in as much as the behavior represents a reason for it being there. So if you're seeing behavior and concluding that's naughty, willful, difficult, rude, etc., and it might well be.
Yes.
In autism, my question would be why? Why is this person laughing instead of showing seriousness? Why are they kicking somebody or screaming? You know, what's going on? If you've only got a brain that works with single-focused attention, and you're only noticing aspects of a whole, the bit that you notice mightn't be the complete picture. It won't be. And it could be that that one bit causes distress, causes you to think something's funny, or whatever.
Yes.
And very often, behind all of that, there could be anxiety because you're not quite understanding, confusion. There's a whole heap of accumulated understandings or non-understandings that will be a trigger. So I always look for the trigger, and if prevention is better than cure, so
yes,
if possible, I can get to know somebody, and I'll know that this situation will be overwhelming for them. Might be too sensory, too much information for their senses to handle all at once. They, I will look for a trigger and then try to switch it off. But if I can prevent the trigger, that's even better.
And I think you've mentioned really great points in the sense that there's a lot of misreading of our population, in the sense that, as you said, it's not naughty behavior and it's not rude behavior. That if a child is obviously exhibiting not positive viewed from the outside community behavior, that behavior is a sign of communication to something else. In the sense that often the community, there's other issues that follow along, like anxiety, and all of these things cause distress within the person to act out. So even if you're seeing somebody act out, there's often 101 other things going on within that person that need to be addressed before the outside can change.
Absolutely.
So often, I know myself as a teacher, one of the things that I do with my neurotypical students is, I taught high school and I love them and they do know everything. And often when my high school student would act out or do something, I wouldn't necessarily automatically jump to the conclusion that they were misbehaving or whatnot. I would see what's going on in their home for that evening, what's going on with them, what challenges are they having? Are they having trouble with the work? 101 other questions that I would ask before dealing consequences or punishment for that behavior.
Absolutely.
And I think often when you deal with a child, from my own experience, is if you deal with a child on that front, you get more connection and a trust enables to happen, and you end up knowing the child, so then you're able to help that child better able cope with their particular situations, and the behaviors are less, if that.
Yep, absolutely.
So when dealing with our community, because as I hope all of you are learning, language is really important, that we do speak different languages, that it's really important to come together and learn each other's language. And if they have an inability to learn yours, learn theirs so that you're able to better access a better course of action. Now, what are the benefits of having autism? And do you believe it's a gift?
Okay, I don't think I believe autism is a gift. I think that being born human is a gift. I'm very happy to be alive, and I have lots of gifts and lots of difficulties. I certainly do not want anybody to take away my autism, because I believe it is what enables me to connect in the ways that I do. I believe it's enabled me to hone in and focus on areas that I'm really interested in. I have a lot of strengths that I think are probably associated with being wired up the way that I am. So I don't see autism in any shape or form as anything bad. And I certainly don't want to be cured. Thank you very much.
Thank you for saying that.
I do know several people who are not on the autistic spectrum. We sometimes refer to them as neurologically typical. And I think they would be candidates for looking at cure, because I tell you, they're dishonest. They're just not nice. They're just not nice. And I don't understand why we separate out people of difference and think that this is therefore a reason to fix. Because the human disposition is to be diverse.
Absolutely.
And neurodiversity should encompass all, not just a few chosen.
Absolutely.
So I welcome my autism. That's for me. I think that there are parents who have autistic kids with very difficult behaviours, and I would say it must be very hard for them to see anything good about their kid's autism. So let's separate the autism from the child in that respect, and let's see how we can change the environment, make things less anxious, less stressful. You will see a different young person when you are actually working at that level where it reaches them, where they can communicate. I mean, the frustration is enormous when you have so much within you that you don't understand and you want to share and say.
Absolutely.
So let's connect them through technology, through things even as simple as PowerPoint. We developed a little PowerPoint display, and it had 2 buttons, yes or no. It was interactive, on an interactive whiteboard. You could actually do this through an iPad. So all you're asking is, would you like this or not? As in, milk, juice, 2 pictures, and you say yes or no. Make things simple, build an understanding, lessen anxiety. You will see a different person. So it's not necessarily that autism is a bad thing. It's that we learn and communicate differently, and when you can relate to us and help release and relieve some of that anxiety, you get to know the person. And I know it's hard work. I'm not naive about these things. As well as high-functioning autism, which is who I am. I have epilepsy, I'm dyslexic, I'm dyspraxic. I have a number of things which cause me problems, I tell you. But even beyond that, there are other people in the world who are a problem. They're just
certainly.
not nice. They're just not nice. And sometimes I want to fix them. So let's learn to relate and get on with each other's differences, and get past and move beyond those differences.
I couldn't have said it any better myself, and I think all of us. I'm dyslexic as well, and I think that we all have our thing, but I think it's that thing that makes us who we are. I know I wouldn't want to get rid of my dyslexia, even though I know it's caused me enormous challenges as a child in school. And the odd thing is I went on to teach.
Well done.
but I had help. Later on in university, where they helped me navigate. So my life is easier, just like you're helping people with autism navigate so that it's easier. But I think the key of what you've mentioned, which I really wish, is that the world would accept differences in people. And I couldn't have said it any better myself. The people we really do need to fix are mean, nasty people. There should be a fix for that. I agree.
There probably isn't, and we probably have to avoid them. But the world's made up of all kinds.
Absolutely. And you've written 15 books. You lecture around the world. What do you want people to learn from your work?
I guess I'd like them to learn some tolerance and patience, understanding as to what autism is, why we do what we do, get to know us, and learn how to relate to us in non-typical ways that suit us best.
And that's excellent advice. And do you have anything else you'd like to tell our audience that we haven't yet mentioned?
Possibly I haven't said enough about sensory stuff.
And please go on about that, because I know that's something that affects my son, and I'm sure many others.
As a kid at school, I did say that I had to wear shades, but earplugs, ear defenders, and a hat was what I had to be in. I very rarely took my hat off, even in bed at times, because I couldn't tell, for example, where a doorway that I was going through ended. I didn't know how high things were. I didn't know how wide. So I used touch a lot to work things out. A lot of sensory things. When you have senses that aren't integrated, that's part of that being single-minded. You have information that's being pulled through one sense only rather than diluted and shared across senses.
Yes.
And synesthesia. So these were things that I had to figure out, and that made understanding life quite difficult.
That must have been challenging.
It's challenging. However, I've come across in the UK and in Australia, I believe they do it in Canada too, where they'll have sensorily friendly times, like at the supermarket and in cinemas.
They're starting to do that here now with certain things.
And although that's good, it bothers me because I don't want it to be a case of us and them.
Yes.
This is your session, and this is for the other people. I'm worried that if we're not careful, rather than building resilience in our own kids and in the typical world out there so they get used to seeing us, it's better. I mean, those things are good and useful, and we need to adapt the environment for sure. My grandkids and I put felt under our chairs and table legs so they didn't scratch on the floor when the kids moved the chairs, and there are little things you can do, but at the same time, it should be okay to wear your headphones. It should be okay. Your ear defenders.
Your noise-cancelling headsets, yes.
Yeah, or ear defenders, and hats and shades, and pulling up a hood on a hoodie and having it over you for a lot of autistic kids helps block out some of that sensory overwhelming stuff. So just like we got used to seeing people in wheelchairs, and we lowered benches and made things friendlier for people to access who were from a wheelchair perspective.
Yes.
We changed the environment. We also got used to seeing them in what they needed to be.
Yes.
So we need to do both. We need to make sure that the world is still seeing autism and not seeing it as, bad. And we need to adapt the world and the environment we're in too. Not just focus on us and them stuff.
Yes.
But bring the two together.
I would love to, if the world could do that. And I know that when doing that, I like what you said about creating a world of us and them, and trying to avoid that, where is if the entire society could accept noise-cancelling headsets and various items about what people need and be comfortable with that, like people are in wheelchairs and wearing hearing aids and all of these things.
That's right,
What a wonderful world that would be. I know as a parent, sometimes when I've brought my child to community center activities that weren't designed for people with autism, You put them in an environment where people don't know anything about autism,
Mm.
and all of a sudden the judgment and
Yeah.
the comments, and I find it builds a lot of anxiety because of the fact that there's a lack of education and a
Yeah.
lack of awareness, and people start asking questions, which I'm often happy to answer.
Yeah.
But I think that if we could all be kind and more tolerant and acceptance, then my son and everyone else would be able to participate in all aspects
Yeah.
of society in without building anxiety and just be it with ease. And that not only goes with community center activities, but in airports and business
Yeah.
locations and everywhere.
Everywhere in the outside world. I have a card which I carry in my wallet that says attention in big letters, and it says I'm autistic, and it says in the case, if it's necessary, these are the people to contact if I'm having a bad time.
Okay.
But the thing is, if I'm really having what they think of as a meltdown, which is a very strange expression because you don't melt and probably don't go down, but if I'm having a tough time, I can't reach in for that card. It's
Okay.
not accessible. So it's a nice idea, but it's not available to me in that time. Instead, I have worn, I haven't got it on at the moment, but it's like a watch
Okay.
that reads my bio, reads my heart rate, which is like pulse,
Yes.
and respiration. Have you come across things like mood rings? That
Yes.
change colour with anxiety. So it picks those things up. And if it's really severe, it can send a message both to me and to a named person that says, I'm getting anxious. Breathe. Or it might say, I can program it to tell me things. That doesn't take any effort from me. It's something that the technology is able to do for me. Intelligent fabric being sewn into a t-shirt or something that can help somebody recognize what's happening for them is a better option. A lot of us would benefit from much, much more.
I haven't even heard of that. That's
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Technology can be really useful in autism, not just for helping us learn, but for when I can't respond in the way that I need to let somebody know what I need.
Yes.
It does it for me.
I know my son wears a medical alert bracelet, which will have his
Yeah, I've got one of those too.
information on just in case he is in that predicament. But the technology which actually monitors your heart rate and sends
already
an
out there.
automatic single, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, we use it when we count 10,000 steps, or with our Jimmy, whatever.
That's it.
I can't think of the word, but I know what they are usually.
That's it.
Yeah, they pick up all sorts of information. So something, it might just vibrate and go green, but whatever it is that you've programmed it to do, it will speak for me or to me or both,
Yes.
and get the sort of help I need in those times. So for kids who might be runners,
Yes.
as in not athletic type runners, but they might take off.
Bolters.
Yeah.
That's it.
There are, and for people with Alzheimer's, this is useful technology in
Yeah.
a whole heap of ways that can help.
And I know my son uses GPS just in case.
Yes.
He's got a GPS tracking system. But I really like the fact of what you're mentioning is that this really indicates that if they're in trouble, to contact someone else. I think that's a great idea, and I'd love to get more information. And I will post it on my social media sites once I actually get the name of what it is you're talking about, because I know myself as a parent, I'm really interested in learning more about that as well.
Thank you.
Now, finally, what would you like the world to know about autism?
I think we said that already.
Yes.
Uh,
It's a question I asked as a finale for the
Yeah.
podcast, and
Yeah.
just really quickly in your words, if you, or is it too a generalized statement?
I would like the world to not just accept autism and not just be aware, but to embrace us and work with us as we are, rather than want to change us. That's what I would like.
Well, I want to thank you, Dr. Wenn, for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I know I've learned an unbelievable amount from you today, and I hope our audience has done so as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wenn, for joining us for the month of December on our podcast. You've so graciously imparted your knowledge and wisdom with us, and we are so truly grateful. I know that I personally have learnt a lot, and I'm sure that the others listening out there have as well. If you would like to contact Dr. Wenn, you can do so by going to our website at autism30.com, and you can find all of his contact details there. Now, a reminder of 2 items. The first, that if you're listening to us on iTunes, please don't forget to write a review. And the second, join our free monthly newsletter. You can do so by going to our webpage at autism30.com and click the word subscribe and fill in your details. Once again, we hope that you're having a wonderful holiday season, and this, the final time in 2017. This is Tally telling you to live in love.
Hey yo, I'm an autism awareness angel, making sure my wings protect the different, the stranger than. I'm an autism awareness angel. It's good, cause I'm cool with the unique behavior. I'm an autism awareness angel. Will you accept me? Cause I accept you. I'm an autism awareness angel, cause the view from the spectrum is a better point of view.